watch it again, do we? All right. It's time to bring up our honored guest. Jim, please come forward. Jim is from Lamars, Iowa. I think he's the oldest of 10 children. Is that correct? Lamars, Iowa is way out west.
25 miles north of Sioux City.
Yeah. Let's see, what else can I tell about him? If I can remember everything. I think he volunteered for the military. Is that correct?
Right, October 1942.
And he has 6 children, 5 girls and a boy. Yeah. He was forced to retire at 65.
Right.
So he's been retired for 31 years. That's pretty good. 33 years, oh, total now. All right.
Pretty cool.
So I'm gonna let him take over.
Yes, thank you, Mike. You know, this is a historic evening for me because
Oh, right there. I got the camera. I'm kind of trying to record this thing.
this is probably going to be my last presentation that I make. And I want to talk about that word presentation for a second. When Mike and I talked about this now, he didn't tell me about being a speaker. He told me we were going to discuss this and that, because we both agreed that people get a lot more out of a meeting if they get answers to the questions they went to the meeting with. So a lot of this is going to depend, how long we talk is going to depend on how many questions you have, because I'm going to try to answer every one of them, if I can. But it's a story that's got so many tales to it that it's kind of hard to tell in a short period of time like we got here tonight. I have told you, I think, that I was not a pilot. I was a combat air crewman. And on these cats that you've been looking at here, there is a crew of 10 people. 3 officers and 7 enlisted men. The enlisted men are split up between aviation machinist mate and aviation radioman and aviation ordnanceman. I was an ordnanceman who has to do with bombs and everything, as you well know. This tour of duty that I went on in the South Pacific started after I spent quite a bit of time just getting to where the squadron was, because when I was assigned to squadron, I was in gunnery school in Hollywood, Florida, and the squadron was in Perth, Australia. And I think that I've got a record, it's the only record I've got, as being the furthest away, or the furthest to go, you might say, to get to the squadron that I was assigned to. And in those days, you know, they didn't fly guys around. Everybody either went by ship or by rail. No flying. In fact, this was so long ago that they didn't even have helicopters. And that impacted what I was doing, because we did what the helicopters do today, you know, and they had the right tool because they had a PBY, that's the one that I was flying in, and there are two kinds of PBYs. One kind is the flying boat, and the other one is the amphib. Now, we could not fly the amphibs and do what we were doing, simply because there was just too much weight tied up in those wheels, like about 3,000 pounds. And we would rather take the 3,000 pounds and use it for fuel in the gas tank, and maybe ammo or bombs or ordnance material in the plane. And we couldn't do that if we're dragging that 3,000 pounds of wheels around. So our aircraft was strictly a flying boat. And it was a flying boat that was, and you'll be surprised to hear, designed for restful flying. Now think about this. This plane was made at the height of the Depression, and it was made before all this detection equipment came along. And it was made by people flying out and observing what's approaching the coast. And the main thing they wanted to do was to keep those eyes fresh, and so that you could not miss what you want to see. And that's exactly what it did. We could, this it's hard to understand what they did just to make things easy for us. For one thing, you could stand up and walk back and forth in this plane, upright. Now, if you ever tried crawling around one of those B-17s or B-25s, you'd appreciate that. It was built for long-range operations. In other words, we took off at 6 o'clock in the evening, and we flew all night long, patrolled all night long, and come back at 8 o'clock in the morning. And needless to say, that's a long time to just sit and stare out at the ocean, of course. And but flying at night, camouflaged as we were, we didn't have to keep a sharp eye out for enemy fighters, and we were not in any big danger of being detected at night. So we didn't have to stay as fresh as a daisy at night. And anyway, I was in BPB 52. B stands for Heavier Than Air, P Patrol Boat. So 52 was my squadron's number. We normally operated in conjunction with a group of 4 squadrons. There's about 15 planes to a squadron, more or less, depending on how the engines are running and so on. These squadrons would rotate. Now, the film that you saw, we were waiting to come in and take over at it, and this film was made at Samurai. It was made about Christmas time in 1943. And I remember vividly when they were doing it. In fact, they took some pictures, still pictures, and I've got them here in a book that I put together. Anyway, we knew that we didn't know, they didn't tell the enlisted men what all was going on, for a good reason. We were kept kind of dumb, really, because they didn't want us to know, because they For one thing, planes were lost back of the lines, and when that happened, it was not good for the crews if they fell into Japanese hands. They had a lot of ways of getting information from me, and they didn't want us to have any information to give them. So we were kept, the officers, of course, were checked out very well, knew it all, but not the crew. We were very careful about security. We did not carry any letters, anything that would identify us. And I think it probably was good. Like I say, they had ways of making people talk, and we had some crewmen that we lost back in the lines. I would like to, before we get into this discussion, I would like to tell you about one of our pilots, and his name was Bill Lahadny. And Lahadny, I think, was a frustrated fighter pilot in PBY, if you can imagine that. Well, he was a social butterfly, and he would get around to all these different functions that were going along, like the USO would come out, put some programs on, have singers and dancers, and he would go out there and talk it up with these guys. And anyway, we were operating with a squadron, a B-25 squadron, 5th Air Force. And our off-duty job was to cover their strikes on the coast of New Guinea. And if one of them went down, we'd go down and try to fish them up. But anyway, in talking to these B-25 pilots, Bill Lahadny found out that these B-25s had a 75 millimeter cannon in the nose. Well, he wrote that down in his little memory book in his head. And when he got back, he said, we're going to put one of them in a PBY. So our project was cut out, of course, and I was an ordnanceman, of course, and I got my share of that duty. Well, we got this 75 millimeter from the 5th Air Force, and we proceeded to try to put it in, and we worked, we got it in, and we all stand there for test firing of this gun, and they fired it, and it went right out the tail. So that plan didn't work. So he said, well, we'll just put some 50 calibers in that nose, you know. So he winds up with 4 50 caliber machine guns in the nose of the PBY. Now, you see why I said I think he was a frustrated fighter pilot. He could imagine himself, you know, strafing with these 4 50s. But anyway, we then proceeded to put the 450s in, which worked much better. But there wasn't much research done, and we run into a few little problems here and there. At the time we got the 450s in the nose, I was first ordnanceman in a squadron, plane number 48. And anyway, this plane had, our plane, they fixed up 4 or 5 of them with 450s firing forward. But anyway, here I had to stand in the nose on the barrels of the 450 and fire twin 30s, which is a trick in itself. But we had this, we didn't have any power turrets. We had manual turrets that we would spin by spinning their body. And anyway, It was really a good idea, because what we were doing was trying to cut the Japanese supply line. Do you have those pictures of the different places that we were at?
Yeah, before I switch slides, I dug up this picture of this PBY. It's a BlackCat, and I had to put a dress on the galley. It was a blow up of the nose art. It was a little inappropriate. So.
It's terrible for the, it's not very streamlined either. But anyway, what we were trying to do was cut the Japanese supply line between Tokyo and Rabaul. Now the Japanese were sending their supply lines out to a main base. They had basically 3 or 4 main bases in the area that we were in. One of them was at Rabaul, and the other 2 were not too far away. But they would do is send the ships to like Rabaul, unload the ships, and then they would go on to smaller barges, and they would barge them out to these islands that they were trying to protect. And man, I don't think the Japs thought this whole deal out too well before they started, because if they would have, they wouldn't have had places to support all over the place, and they had to be supported. You can't just leave people out there with nothing to eat, So that's the way they work their supply line. Ship it into Rabaul, put it on smaller vessels, get it out to these outlying islands. But anyway, when the 450s were not all that great a weapon for the ships, we had other plans for them. But they were very good for strafing barges, and we did that periodically too, where we get down in the middle of those barges. They send them out in fleets, in the barge fleets, and run through back and forth strafing the barges. Now, what we're going to be talking about, and I don't expect you all to see too good on this, but if you notice the this is the coast of this is New Guinea. We have that movie that you saw was shot right there. This new technology don't work too good.
They didn't have laser pointers back then.
Anyway, let me get back to the point. Like they say, point and grunt, Anyway, that movie was made right here at a place called Samurai. I know you can't all see it, but it's in Samurai right there. Now, we would fly at night. We would get in our planes about 6 o'clock, and this is about 400 miles up to the St. George Channel. You see that channel up there? That put us in the Bismarck Archipelago, and that's where we, for some reason or other, the Japanese thought they had to go through that Bismarck Archipelago in order to get to Rabaul. And Rabaul was right up at the end of that island there. Now this is New Guinea. That island right there is New Britain. And the island up the other side over there, that long skinny thing, is New Ireland. And then New Britain is to the north there. That's that big blob that you see. So that area in the middle is called the Bismarck Archipelago. And that was where all the action was. Now, if things go right tonight, which they questionable, I'm going to take you all on a flight, on a patrol. Now, there's not room enough for all of you to get on that plane. So we're going to have a drawing. I'm just kidding. We're not going to have a drawing, but we're going to go as if one of you is on that plane, okay? All right. Any questions so far? Don't hesitate to ask questions.
What was the weight of the airplane?
33,000 pounds.
Wingspan.
Yeah.
What was the armament? Gross weight of the armament?
What's that?
That's gross weight of the armament?
Yes, it is. And petroleum. If you got further questions, well, I'll show you where that information comes from. Any other questions? Oh man, we got a good question here.
Did you have radar?
Did we have radar? Now you're right at the heart of what this whole thing was all about. And that is, prior to the time of radar, it wasn't healthy to fly a PBY because we couldn't navigate very well at night, just like anybody else. And in the daytime, the Japanese could see you, and their zeros were a heck of a lot faster than we were, and you wouldn't live long in the Japanese area with those conditions. Now, the British had been working very, very hard. Can you all hear me back there?
Yeah.
Had been working very, very hard on airborne radar. We started that in about 38 and finally perfected it. And as they perfected it, our commanders in the Navy could see a tremendous opportunity develop. And that opportunity was, and take these old BlackCats that are absolutely worthless because we can't fly them at night, can't navigate, can't fly them daytime and shoot them down, but there they are. See? So all of a sudden, they transferred the pilots, the squadrons that had been flying patrol in the Atlantic Ocean protecting the convoys, and transferred them to the Pacific. And that's when I joined them, was in the Pacific at Perth. When we had the radar, then all of a sudden we can navigate, because with radar you know where the land is, you know where everything is. It takes a different shape, but it's there, and you can steer your way around it, of course. And the other thing, we could use the radar as a search engine, as they say, which is pumping radar beams out to all sides. And we would fly at about 4,000 feet, and that let us reach out about 15 miles in our search. once we picked up a blip, we just turned the plane towards the blip, flip on the homing, and just walk it on down to where we could see the wake of that ship or whatever it was, and start our glide. And we just glide in, drop 4 bombs in train with our intervalometer, and as far as the bombs are concerned, we had 2 bombs under each wing. And one of them was a 500-pounder, one was a 1,000-pounder. Same way on the other side, 500 and a 1,000-pounder. We were dropped to 5, the 1,000, the 1,005 in train, and that was pretty much the way we did it. Simply come in, glide in. The first pilot, who was flying the plane, PPC, he had this pickle in his lap, and he'd just pick it up and fly in and drop the bombs. And we were very, very fortunate in that those bombs were very effective, because what made them effective was they had 4-second delayed action fuses. So once the bomb hits, it goes through the deck, and then it probably goes through the second deck. And now the bomb is at the bottom of the ship, and the bomb goes off. So you have 1,000-pound explosion down in the bowels of the ship. There's only one thing that's probably going to happen, and that is the whole bottom goes out of that ship. Most of these ships were not in the greatest of shape in the first place, but I have seen ships sink in less than 5 minutes after they were hit. You see them go under the waves. And that's a great feeling when you see that. And you, hopefully you guys will see that on this trip that I'm going to take you on. Question?
Why were you gliding on the attack?
We were gliding because that's what worked the best. We were going in there slow, fairly slow. They wouldn't see us.
We couldn't hear you.
What's that?
Because it was quiet too.
Yeah, it's quiet. We didn't want to wake them up. And they woke up in a hurry when those bombs went, I'll tell you for sure. But anyway, now contrast that, if you will, at the way they were bombing in Europe. 5 miles up. Cold. I mean, I guess you don't know what cold is till you've been flying up there for a while. But just so cold, and we got these all wrapped up in these big jackets. Then they had what they call the bomb sight. And this new bomb sight would, they said, drop a bomb in a pickle barrel. Well, I got to see that one. They were lucky, I think, that the bomb even got close to what they were bombing. But that was quite a contrast. 5 miles up or masthead, and when you lay them in there at masthead, you don't miss. I mean, you're laying them down. If you made the right approach, you can judge where you want to lay those 4 bombs. Just a question.
Was it normal to come in from the back of the boat?
If we could, that was the preferable place to come from. We like to come in because it gave us a bigger target. When you come in we come in from the port quarter or the starboard, and we had, you might say, the whole length of the ship that we could hit. If we went across the center of the ship, much smaller target to use a bomb.
Could you drop your bombs just one at a time, or does it all?
Yes, we could drop them one at a time, and oftentimes I've seen that happen where they would drop one just to get a reaction from the ship. They wanted to open up, and then we had a better fix on where they were because we lost track of them. But any other questions?
Well,
Yeah.
I read a book where in Britain they were flying night bombers and they found shiny black paint was harder to see than flat black paint.
That is true, and we had flat black paint, not shiny. Yeah, they were painted with flat black. Other question?
Does we have a high-powered light or something? I mean, once you are coming, how could you see them? I mean, they're not going to be.
Well, we didn't want to see. We didn't have to see them. I mean, well, we would see them before we hit them, of course.
Radar, no, I understand that. But then would you just follow the wake in, or?
If they were going fast enough to make a wake, yes, we'd key on the wake. Absolutely. Absolutely. Moonlight helps, but it also helps them. You see, here's another advantage that we had that they were not aware of. They were used to practicing gunnery practices in the daytime, and they were used to practicing on planes that are flying at 300 miles an hour. Well, when they start and they don't know exactly where you're at in the beginning, and they think you're over here, when they think the plane up there is flying at 300 miles an hour, they're going to shoot over here. They're going to lead it. Well, that's what we wanted them to do, lead us. Because we had to go like the Dickens to catch up with them. The slow speed really was to our advantage because they never saw anything fly that slow. But as to the light, when we wanted light, what we had was million candle power paraflares. Have you ever heard of them? We could throw out a paraflare and set it for where we wanted to trigger, and it would drop down to that altitude, go off. All of a sudden, you're lighting up a big area. But that's what we used when we wanted light, and then occasionally that would happen. Occasionally. Any other questions? You guys are doing pretty good on these questions. I mean, you have to give you a good grade. Yes.
How fast did you go? I heard they cruise pretty slow.
Well, there's an old saying, you know, the guy asked about how fast that PBY is going. Well, it takes off at 100 miles an hour, flies at 100 miles an hour, lands at 100 miles an hour. That's the answer. But our top speed was about 190 miles an hour.
190?
190 top speed. Right. We got a little bit of a dive pushed in there too, you know. Yes, sir. Somebody. Speaking of light, we're going to have some light in here.
Another question, I just read a book with the title Zoomies, Submarines, and Zeros. And I guess the Zoomies are referring to our fighter aircraft, and I've never heard that term anywhere before.
What term is that?
Zoomies.
Oh, zooming? Yeah, I've heard that a lot of times. Because that's what we do when we come back. If we had success in sinking a ship or whatever, we'd say he zoomed, you know.
Okay.
That was probably a World War II 2 saying, that's why you haven't heard it. You're too young for that. Any other questions? I can't, I've got macular degeneration. I'm doing good if I can see there's a crowd out there.
Got one Chris back there.
Yes, Chris.
So how long was your service there for what you were doing?
All right, this varied somewhat, but normally we were on the same duty for approximately 30 days. Then we would rotate, move to a new base of operation, and another PBY squadron the same size would move in our position. For instance, that movie that you saw was made of Squadron 34. There was 33, 34, 52, and 11. Those 4 squadrons operated together.
When you went out on a mission searching out a convoy and you had 4 bombs, was it normal for you to drop all 4 bombs at one ship and sink it and go home, or did you try and...
It was our normal way of doing it to drop all 4 because it allows you, you got a better chance of, with the kind of bombs we were carrying with the 4-second delayed action fuses, it was, you were more apt to hit one of those than going in and out trying to drop a bomb. And we always knew when our bombs were dropped armed, because you could look out at the bomb racks and these wires would be dangling there. You knew the bomb dropped armed, if that was so.
How far down in the water would they detonate if it was a miss?
How far down in the water, you mean before the bomb go off?
Well, yeah, let's say, it misses, hits the water, does it detonate, way down deep in the water then also?
They would go way down deep in the water, right. And it would depend a lot on what altitude you dropped them at and so forth. But they would then go down into the water and not do near the damage that it really took to sink the ship, Yes, sir.
On some of the dives that the movie was reporting to, that they would dive steeply, how quickly would they descend, do you know?
How
bad
quick?
on your ears?
What's that?
How bad was it on your ears and how quickly they descend?
Oh, there was no problem on the guy and the guys in the plane's ears. You talk about those poor guys up there at night, 5 miles in the air. The flying conditions were beautiful. I mean, it wasn't too warm and it wasn't too cold. We couldn't complain about the weather because we were flying at night. Yes, sir.
Did you have any contact when you filmed any operations with the Australians before they had taken one?
Yes, but not much. We really the New Zealanders were more into the PBYs than the Aussies were. But anyway, any other questions for yes?
Did you guys use life rafts in the water?
Did we use life rafts in the water?
Yes.
Yes, we did. If we were unfortunate enough to get down into the water, we used them. We had 2 life rafts back. You've seen those bubbles or the waist area. They were right up, strapped up against the wall, or the bulkhead as they call it in the Navy. In the back, right in back of where the blister starts there. And we had to use them if we got down in the water. Yes, sir.
Was anybody shooting at you from, the boats or wherever?
Yes, they would do the very best that they could, and fortunately, the surprise was very high that they wouldn't probably, a lot of them never saw us till the bombs hit.
Could you see tracers going by?
You could see tracers very, very brightly go by. And that didn't make you feel too good, really. Am I missing anybody? I can't see very well. Yes, sir.
Did you ever carry torpedoes?
No, I noticed that they talked about loading torpedoes on in that film, but we did not use torpedoes. We really didn't. The bombs were much more effective for us than the torpedoes would have been. Yes.
Can you tell us how many rescue operations you went on and how many were successful?
Our squadron rescued 52 or 3 men. Now that's the whole squadron. I personally was never in on a rescue. But of course my ship, the other planes were, but we never rescued anybody in our plane. There were a number of B-25s that were shot down in those raids. And if they could get out the water, we could, one of our planes could go in and take them out. But if they went down and land, why, there was nothing we could do for them. Okay? Yes?
How many gunners did you have? I mean, you have 3 officers and 7 enlisted. What did the 7 enlisted do?
All right, the 7 enlisted men, were dispensed in the plane like this. We had an aviation radioman, 2 of them. One would be on the radio constantly. One would be on the radar when we were in a position to find ships with the radar. And they were generally always in the radio compartment. When I was first ordnanceman, I flew in the bow, handled the bow switches, the intervalometers, and like I say, stood on top of those 450s and fired twin 30s.
Who fired the 50s?
But that
Who fired the 50s?
pilot,
The pilot?
yeah, he was the frustrated fighter pilot. I was. Yes, sir.
You had the amphibious and you had the flying boats. The flying boats, how are you loading the ordnance? You put gear on that to bring them out of the water? You put the plane back in the water? Or was that?
Oh, how do we get them in and out of the water? What we did was I stand by my no wheels, But what they do is bring them right up to where and these were specially selected spots where on these little islands where we had these bases built where we work on, for instance, like Samurai there. And we'd bring the plane up and it would pull it. There was a little fastener on the back. We'd pull that plane tail up first and snap on a set of wheels on each side and the one in the back. And they would be like a tricycle, Pull it right up and hook the power onto the back wheel, pull it up on the beach. And that's the way we got them on the beach. That was the way we used the wheels. We had to put them on manually. Anybody else? Yeah.
What was your technique for landing in rough water, rough conditions?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Now, when there was many times when it was too rough to land, but they'd land anyway. And I'm serious, they'd go down terribly rough water. But what wouldn't happen would be that they would come down as close as they could to the water and then throttle back and back a little more and drop it right into the They try to time it for the waves, but they often didn't get timed right. Now, we in the, and this is a very critical time in a PBY, because if that wave catches that nose, that plane turns upside down. We had that happen. But what we would do in the guys in the plane, when we knew we were going to make a stall landing, we call it a stall landing, we start sharpening pencils. Now, why do you suppose we were sharpening pencils? Because when those landings, if you can imagine this, were so hard that they would pop the rivets in the plane. And we had to have a pencil ready to put in that hole and get awful wet in the plane. We'd stick pencils in the hole where the rivets had been. Any other questions? You guys are good question askers. Yeah.
Did they ever figure out where they were hiding the planes? How did you keep them hidden?
You mean our planes?
Yeah.
No, they. I think they would like to, but see, that again was part of the strategy. Was that we were like 400 miles before we went to work, and they didn't have planes. They would fly 400 miles down to where we were looking around for us, and then flying back. And they just didn't have that kind of range on our planes, and that was well figured out by the Navy how far we needed to get away from them, so they weren't looking all the time to find us. Now we operated in two ways. We either operated like we were looking at here a little while ago. That was an old recreational base that the Aussies built. Like they'd go up to their cabin, they'd go up to these places like Samurai, and they built these houses up there, and each one of these houses had a tank up on top because it rained every day, and that was a good source of nice soft water. But when we got there, we paid the price, because that open water tank up on top of each one of these houses was a perfect place to breed mosquitoes. And everybody, nobody that I know of excluded, we all got malaria. In fact, I had malaria twice out there, and once after I got back to the States. That was almost as bad an enemy as the Japanese were. Yes, sir.
Did you get a lot of intelligence from coast watchers?
From what?
Coast watchers?
Oh yeah, you bet. We got a lot of help from them, and we got a lot of help because they broke the code. And every evening before we'd go out, one of the Aussie planes would come over and drop a canister. They never told us what was going on there, but what was happening was that they were sending us, they were very, very cautious about getting anything on the air. They didn't want any way that the Jats to find out we had broken the code. But what they dropped in those canisters, they dropped it about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That information went right straight in, and there's a ship here. You can expect one there. There's another one, and they had this information. A lot of it came from listening to breaking that code. So we had two things going for us. The code breaking was one of the biggest. And that information was coming in, and we had to, and then, because the pilots would say, if we're going to see that thing, we're going to see it in the next 5 minutes, Well, how the heck do they know they're going to see it in 5 minutes? And we got to thinking, we weren't sharpest tool in the box, but we got to figure that there's something going on here we don't know about, you know. That's why I say they kept the enlisted guys in the dark purposely, and that was fine with us. Any other questions? Okay. Now, real quickly, like, I know you guys probably getting a little itchy here, but
How much is your book?
$20. But took me off my feet there.
Haven't got on our mission yet.
Yeah, right. We got to get going here. Now I'm just going to kind of run through a mission. To set this thing up, we had lost a plane about 3 days before this mission started. And we didn't know what happened to them. We knew that they got shot down in the St. George Channel. Oh, it's a sticker, which is right here. That's the St. George Channel. This is Raval right here. And we had lost a plane right about there, and they had radioed in that they'd been shot down. And we had knew that they had orders to get to the Coast Watcher. Now we had the Coast Watchers right here, and the tip of New Ireland. So this mission that we're going to go on tonight happened. We knew that our crew would be trying to get to these Coast Watchers. So we were monitoring their chatter real closely and let them know that this crew was trying to get to them. And anyway, as we go on this mission, we had that in mind. Now we knew we had been talking to the Coast, our command had been talking to the Coast Watchers and the way they talked to them. And the Coast Watchers were anticipating this crew, natives, to bring them in. Well, unfortunately, they had been captured prior to this time by the Japanese. Japanese took the officers, the 4 officers, to Raval, and enlisted men were given to another contingent. Well, unfortunately, the other contingent didn't really know what they were doing with 7 worthless non-commissioned officers, or non-coms. So they executed them. And shortly after, they took charge of them. So they didn't never get to the Coast Watcher. But this night, on this mission that we're going on, we were, just before our plane took off, we received 5 packages. And these packages were dropped to the Coast Watchers. Now they had a certain way of doing things and I won't get into that, it's going to take too much time. But where to drop the packages, which contained whatever the Coast Watchers wanted, that they thought they needed to handle this crew that was shot down. So those 5 packages were loaded. Max Hofflines, the first pilot, was in charge of getting them dropped to the Coast Watchers at the place they wanted them dropped. The signal was they would have 2 lights go on, and the lights were perfectly north and south. When that went on, then we would head for the light And as soon as we got to where the first light was, we'd start dropping as fast as we could and drop those packages to the Coast Watchers. And this particular night now, this Max Hoffmeister's family had sent him a new wristwatch for his for Christmas. And anyway, I heard this line of swear words, you know. And I never heard Max Hoffmeister ever swear or anything. And finally, he kept mumbling and grumbling, and finally figured out what it was. And one of these packages had caught on the wristband of his brand new watch and tore it off, and it went down with the package. And Max again, I hope he enjoyed that thing. he was really upset about it. But yeah, and then when what we did is we flew right across here. See, we left from down here. This is Honey Hollow. You read about it in the book there, and cut right on up here to the tip of New Ireland, and we dropped the packages right there for the Coast Watchers. Then we went over on the outside of New Ireland and flew on up here to Dial Island. You know, at Dial Island we crossed over. This is Dial Island out here. We crossed over, and there was a ship. Just like I think they said it was going to be a ship, because I think the pilots knew that ship was going to be there from some information they'd gotten earlier in the day. And it was just putzing along. It acted like I almost didn't want to make a wake, you know. And I think that they had the idea that maybe that wake that they were making is tipping them off, because this ship was in close to shore. It was in close to shore, and it was traveling very, very slowly. Well, when we cut across this island here, New Ireland, we saw the ship immediately. And the pilot started down at it. And I'd say it was maybe 3/4 throttle, and dropped all 4 bombs. 2 of those bombs hit that ship, went down through the bottom, went off. And Mr. Lloyd told me to start strafing. I was at that time, I was not made first ordnance yet. So I was firing the 50 on the left side, and I started strafing the ship. And Mr. Lloyd turned over and he gave Stirrup, the other gunner, he said, now you will have the saddle strafe this side, which he did, which he started to, but the ship, and I looked at it, it was going down. You could just, the prow was pointing at the moon, and just went down under the waves. That fast. That bottom of the ship must have just disintegrated when those bombs hit. But that we normally didn't have that many exciting things like dropping to the Coast Watchers and getting some solid hits on a freighter which sank almost within our sight. And so I thought and then the next time we went out, it wasn't that nice. We got the hell shot out of us. But that one was, we come back in and, man, that's a piece of cake, We never seen anything like that before. We really thought this isn't going to be such a bad job after all. But our minds got changed within a week. Yes.
How often would you find ships?
I would say that probably that we would, every third time out, we would find them. But lots of times, the next time we went out, we were up at the end of that at Caviang, and there was a cruiser sitting right in the mouth of Caviang. And when we got there, the captain, his name is Rudy Lloyd, and he was. How many of you know what a Mustang is? Anybody know what a Mustang is? He's an enlisted man that became an officer. But anyway, Rudy was 35 years old, very old for a pilot. And I reported this ship in the mouth of the harbor, and he acted like he never heard me, you know. And he heard me, but he was trying to decide which direction and where he was going to go. But anyway, about that time, he flipped the plane over on the right and started down at this cruiser, and he never saw. You talk about light up. You know. They evidently heard us on their sound detection gear, knew we were there, and they were just waiting and hoping, I think, that we didn't see them. But when they opened up with everything, and there was shells going underneath on both sides. And then instead of, when he went across, he dropped. When he went across, I thought he'd pull up, but he didn't. He just kept going down. And I swear that right wing was 10 feet off the water when he whipped around to the right. Got out of there. All the other ships in the harbor opened up, and that was a real fireworks demonstration. But anyway, I have enjoyed visiting. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Where were you when the war ended?
When the war ended, I was sitting on top of a barracks drinking beer. In Memphis, NAS Memphis, Tennessee, they had sent me there to help open gunnery range for the cadets. But that's where I was, and my buddy and I had gotten a 6-pack of beer, and we were just sitting up there reminiscing. But that's the truth. Yes, sir.
How many missions did you fly? Or what
Depends
was
on
the
what you
average?
call a mission. If you call everything a mission, you know, you'd be counting, we were counting like running an engine in or something like that. But I would say a real, honest to God, missions is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 25, 30.
Did they have a limit, like you hit your
No.
flight and
No, we went more by time.
you
Yeah. And you had 18 months in out there, and then they bring you back.
How did you guys evade the Japanese sound detection?
Oh, yeah. See, the Japanese were putting all their money on the sound detection. I don't know why, but they did. And the Brits had been working hard on this, getting this radar that would work in a plane. And anyway, we knew they had sound detection because as we would approach this place here at the bow, the searchlights would all come on. And those searchlights whipping all over, and they're looking for us. If you ever got that searchlight, you usually had a problem. It was hard to get out of, almost impossible. But what our pilots, now, you might take exception to this and say, it won't work. but they swore by it. We had a twin engine plane, two 1200 Pratt & Whitney's air radios, and they would run one faster than the other. Take them out of sync, they called it. And they maintained that the Japanese couldn't tell how many planes there were up there. They couldn't tell for sure where they were coming from and so forth. Now, I don't know, any of you guys ever hear that before? See, they knew something you didn't know. But when those engines went out of sync, we were in tight, you know. Any other question? Yes, sir.
Maybe it's a stupid question, but how were you always positive the target was a Japanese ship?
No American or Allied ship would be in his right mind to be where they were. You know, friendly fire could be a submarine or something like that. But we had what we call IFF. Have you ever heard of IFF? That stands for Identification Friend or Foe. So when we were flying, if one of our planes, we get them on radar, one of our planes starts following us, he doesn't know whether it's a Japanese plane or an American plane. The pilot would turn left. And is he turning left? Yes, sir, turn left. And the pilot would turn right. Is he turning right? Yes, he turned right. Turn on the IFF. See, as soon as they turned that IFF on, the plane was gone because we had IFF detectors. That plane did too. But we never ran with them on. We only turned them on when we had to have them. More questions? Well, I told you that this is going to be a memorable meeting for me. I've never talked to a group this old before in my life. And the other thing that is going to be memorable is this is my last meeting. I'm not putting on any more meetings. So, and I will remember that.
Can you talk about that picture? Where is it at, and who's in the blister there?
Oh, yes, sir. This is a book. I used to tell my kids stories about the war, and they said, "Grandpa, why don't you just write a book?" So Grandpa wrote a book, and that book is, where is it? Up here. It's called Conflict to Combat in the South Pacific. And a lot of people told me it's a very good read. I'd like to know if you think it is too. So they're there, and they're $20 each.
And there's a lot of them.
And there's a lot of them. We're not going to run out before you leave. Okay. It's been a pleasure.
Who's in the picture there?
In the bubble.
In the bubble.
See the bubble? Right here?
Yeah.
That's me.
Where was that taken?
This was taken right over Honey Hollow, right near where a lot of that movie that you saw tonight was taken. And there's a formation of 3 planes. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. You're a good group, and you ask good questions, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. I think that's all we have tonight. I'm sure Jim will stick around for questions, and if you want to buy a book, thanks for coming. Have a good night.